Outlaw, Cowboy, Mercenary, Gun for Hire. They're known by many different names but are functionally the same entity. A man or woman from the western area of the United States, making their living how they see fit. Brandishing a colt revolver, a repeater rifle, and riding horseback, these infamous figures in modern American culture have made their mark in history as vigilantes, doling out justice on their own terms and making a living while doing it. Fallout New Vegas is a post-apocalyptic RPG game that lets the player do virtually anything they want. You can be Mr Goody-Two-Shoes, a supervillain, mediocre. The choices are endless. So with that being said, can you beat Fallout New Vegas as a Western Outlaw? Now essentially what I just asked was if you could beat New Vegas with only a revolver. And the answer is yes, Mitten Squad did that. But this isn't a revolver only playthrough. Going into this I had no rules other than I can only use weapons cowboys would use, so this limited my weapon pool quite a bit. I also went the route that would net a struggling cowboy the most amount of money, and this gets annoying later on. I started with my name, as every great western often does. I chose Pearl Hart because she's if Annie Oakley was an outlaw, and decided on being bald because women without hair frighten others. I stood up and ran around the room, overjoyed that I didn't have to walk everywhere this playthrough. I chose my special stats, and it would be later on that I would regret these choices. I sat down and proceeded to answer the doc's questions as cowboy as I could. After playing 20 questions, I chose my skills. I chose guns because, well, guns. Guns kill people and I wouldn't be a good cowboy if I didn't kill people. I chose speech because an outlaw was equally as deadly as they were charming, and I left on lockpick. I chose trigger discipline for accuracy that wouldn't matter later, and skilled because I am skilled. Kinda. I then borrowed everything from Doc Mitchell and met him at the door. He gave me his Pip-Boy and jumpsuit, and I could finally head out into the world. It's been close to a year since I've played, so I vaguely remembered what to do. However, the show must go on. I went to the saloon to talk to the sun that smiles. She gave me a refilet and I destroyed them their bottles. I then told her to take a hike and talk to Trudy, who was as unremarkable as always. I tried to fix a radio but was too mechanically inexperienced to even attempt it. So I left for Chet. I sold items and set off for the cemetery, where my body lay just hours before. I was going to dig up a grave for a revolver, but forgot you needed a shovel, and of course one doesn't spawn here, so I left. I spoke to fellow cowboy Victor for absolutely no reason at all, then finally left for Prim. I was in for a long journey filled with bullshit ahead of me, but I didn't know that. Present me has a challenge to beat. I ruined 2 geckos along the route, desperately wishing that I had a better weapon. I then talked to the NCR trooper, following the distance ordinance to prevent disease spread. I then walked into Prim, expertly diffused the mines, and finally ran into human enemies for the first time. I showed these two the business end of my blicky, got dressed in the best cowboy armor in the game, and headed inside to talk to Johnson Nash. After being spoken to, I went across the street to the BSH in search of Deputy Beagle. I sent the first convict to the morgue and tried unlocking the door. However, I was both too stupid to use the terminal and too naive to pick the lock, so I carried on. I picked the maintenance door, sent a convict to the afterlife, saw the reason why I came here, and proceeded to clean house. I then leveled up, so I deposited some points into repair for the sole purpose of fixing Trudy's radio because I have priorities, and then I put the rest of the points in guns since I shoot people good. I then picked rapid reload because reloading is important. The faster you load a mag, the faster you put those bullets down range. I then freed the dog and took him for a walk outside. He told me where to go, so I set off to Nipton, peacemaker in hand. My game then crashed for the first time, allowing me to look at Best Girl for a couple of seconds while I reloaded it. I popped back into where I was before that happened and continued on. I took the hard way to Nipton and inadvertently walked past a herd of bighorners who chased me for 1,000 yards. See? I strolled into Nipton and killed Lottery Man right off the bat because Pearl Hart doesn't like nerds. I then talked to Vulpes since he approached me, then set off to find my star weapon. After searching 3 houses, I looked up where to find the Magnum when it was literally right in front of me. I realized this and picked it up, finally having a gun of my caliber, both literally and metaphorically. I then pulled her out in the moonlight and carried on to Novak. I ran up on Vipers and took aim with my trusty revolver before being let down. It did so little damage. This will be a recurring theme in this playthrough. As I tried to back up faster than I was being chased, I remembered an hour into this playthrough that VATS was a thing, and with great aim came great decapitation. I murdered the second one the same way, and with that being done with, continued the Green Mile to Novak. I arrived in Novak like someone owed me money, and headed straight to the T-Rex in search of Manny. I got there too early, so I became a statue performer for a while, bought my other star weapon from Cliff, and headed upstairs to talk to Manny. Except it wasn't Manny. It was still Boone for some reason, so I humored him, waited some more, and then talked to Manny. I wasn't going to go clear those ghouls though, so I left, did my super secret tire skip, and used my year-old knowledge to get to Boulder City. I killed some rad scorpions and somehow made it to Boulder City, silently patting myself on the back for doing so. I convinced Marilyn Monroe to let me in, and I strolled right up to the building Jessup was in. I iced him, just as he had helped Benny ice me a while ago. I then helped the NCR deal with the rest of the cons and leveled up, putting the points in guns, medicine, and speech. I then left Boulder City to get to the Strip. Victor rolled up on me, so I said head ass and kept it moving. I saw a Viper and was going to snipe her, but turns out she wasn't a Viper, so I walked right by her as if I didn't just aim a gun at her. I watched the NCR lay out the fiends before looting the spoils of war. I looted more bodies before crossing the wrong territory. I pulled out my repeater and repeatedly shot the fiends until they all fell before me. I then made it to Freeside, ran my way to the Strip's gate, and was told I'm too poor to enter. So I fast traveled to Camp McCarran and talked to 10 of Spades for literally no reason since I still had no idea what I was doing. I finally remembered the monorail and needed an NCR outfit, so I fast traveled back to Prem. I headed into a tent and lost karma after taking a suit since the elder gods were watching. I then fast traveled back to Camp McCarran and tried to press an unpressable red button before heading inside the terminal building. I donned the NCR armor I borrowed and bypassed soldiers who needed to be fired before taking the monorail. I arrived at the Strip and was pointed at the Lucky 38 by Victor, so like a kid being dragged to summer school, I went. I entered the building, arrived at the penthouse, and gave Jane the snow globe I didn't mention I stole from the cemetery in Good Springs. I then finally talked to Big H himself and was sent to go retrieve the platinum chip. I exited the building and was then intercepted by an NCR trooper who was more annoying than the courier from Skyrim. I headed to the tops, convincing Swank to let me kill Benny first try unlike my Myers playthrough, and headed up, eager to get my revenge. I entered his room and he didn't know it for a couple of seconds. We talked, we tussled, and I lobbed his head off his shoulders. I took the chip and leveled up, putting the points in more guns and speech. I then chose the gunslinger perk for more VATS accuracy. I then left the tops and was ambushed by Volpes with his Caesar invitation. I went back to the Lucky 38, handed over the chip, and was forced to the torture of watching the demonstration. He then instructed me to upgrade the Securitrons at Fortification Hill, and I made sure this playthrough to do that. After exiting the building, I was talked to from 50 feet away again, this time by Emily, who wanted me to bug the Lucky 38. I ain't doing that though. I then fast traveled to the Gunrunners to sell some items. After that was done, Fallout New Vegas needed a break, crashing for the second time this playthrough. I said bruh, reloaded the game, and continued on, fast traveling to Novak to get to Cottonwood Cove. Along the way I fell and broke my legs. After arriving at Cottonwood Cove, we traveled to Fortification Hill, and my infiltration mission began. I talked to Caesar, careful my guys didn't slip, and was sent to blow up the Securitrons. I entered the weather station, opened the bunker, and talked to Daddy House. It was time to brute force my way past the robots. One fell before me, then 2 more. I ruined 2 turrets, 3 protectrons, another turret, and then got staggered to death as I tried to shoot the last turret. So anyway, I inserted the chip upgrade, had my guns taken, and lied to Caesar. I leveled up, dumping my points in barter, speech, and guns. I chose Bloody Mess for that pitiful 5% extra damage. Afterward, I proceeded to get the hell out of Dodge. I ran my way to the New Vegas medical clinic to see my favorite NPC in this game, after which I cleaned out her Stimpack inventory. I eventually made it back to Mr. House, who sent me to deal with the boomers. So I headed out, killing George along the way. The boomers blew me sky high for that, so second time around I bet with him instead, giving him 300 caps I would forget about. I made it through the boomers bullshit this time, conned my way inside, and talked with Pearl for the first time since the last time I played this game. She wanted me to help her non-children, so I agreed. The first person I set off to help was Raquel with the ants, so after getting the key, I headed to Loyal to get the transmitter. Was it deep range? I don't know. So to the array I went. I handed the first ant her own ass. Did you know that most worker and soldier ants you see are female? That's crazy. Anyway, I told all these bitches to cease your resistance. I then activated the generators and left, reporting back to Raquel for my pat on the back. I then found my way back to Loyal and Jack, picking up 2 more quests. I stopped by Argyle and attempted to bullshit my way into healing these people, but was unfortunately too stupid to do so. At this point, I wanted to be done with this playthrough as quick as possible, so I realized there was only one option. I headed back to Loyal and gave him a lead vest. I then watched Pearl get team killed and got the revenge for her. I handed another boomer her own ass and fast traveled out of there to continue on with the rest of my to-do list. Mr. House then sent me to deal with the Emertas, so across the street to the Marvel character I went. After handing over my weapons, I bullied the receptionist and then hunted down Cachino, stealing his journal in front of everyone. I then extorted him for his own property and then was sent to find dirt on some individuals in this mafia. Try to keep up as I run through this nonsense. I talked to Troik about getting his contract released. I then talked to Mr. Little Bit of This and Little Bit of That. I then talked to Big Sal and got Troik released. I gave Troik the good news and he gave me thermite to destroy some guns. I placed it on the required containers and blew them up. I then found Cachino so we could take out the bosses. I soon laid them to rest, and once that was said and done, I reported back to Mr. House for the next task. He wanted me to eliminate the Brotherhood of Steel. I knew that would be hard with my current weapon set, butthead ass. So I traveled to Novak and began my journey. I hit the dusty trail, and eventually made it to Hidden Valley Ranch. I went inside, was told to bend over, and talked to Elder McNamara. He wanted me to get rid of an NCR Ranger, so I grabbed my items and was mad that my hat was too broken to put back on. I laid out a stingy spider, told Dobson the meanest lie known to mankind, and reported back to McNamara. At this point I thought I could Detroit versus everybody, the whole bunker, so I killed Ramos from behind. I goused a naked man and used the dynamite I had for the first time to tunnel the enemies. I was then 5 guy 1 chicked. I decided to try again, which resulted in me failing again. So I decided to try the nuclear option. I needed to steal 3 key cards to self-destruct the bunker. I mandatorily spoke to McNamara, spoke to Hardin, and stared at my quest for an uncomfortably long time. I then stole the key card off of McNamara, borrowed Target's key card, and finally Hardin's after looking for him for literally 18 minutes. It was at this point my game froze for 10 minutes straight. Once I was back in, I activated the self-destruct sequence using the stealth boy I took from Goodsprings that OBS didn't record. I reported back to house and it was time to install the override chip to the El Dorado substation, so I donned the NCR armor from early and headed out. Once I installed it, everyone got up like I did something wrong, but I didn't let that stop me. I reported back to house and it was time for the final battle of Hoover Dam. I arrived like a bad omen, made my way across the bridge, entered the dam, installed the override chip, and flipped the shiny switch. I helped fight some Centurions, made it to the Legate's camp, and killed 1, 2, 3 Praetorian guards. I approached the Legate and talked him out of New Vegas, knowing I couldn't fight him. I watched the NCR explode the doors, told Oliver the NCR was done for, talked to Mr. House, and I beat Fallout New Vegas as a Western Outlaw.